What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. That's Andrew Ivins. This is the Cover 3 College Ball Recruiting Podcast, the recruiting hour of the Cover 3 Podcast. Whatever this is, we are talking recruiting. We are on the Cover 3 channel. Ivins, what's going on, man?
Not much, Bud. Depending on when you're listening to this, we are probably less than a week till signing day. Feels a little weird, right? Earlier than ever. And I feel like I've said this for 4 or 5 weeks consecutively, but hey, buckle up, right? Yeah, you might be adjusting the belt line following your Thanksgiving festivities, but man, just with the coaching carousel, we're getting closer and closer to pen, meet, paper, or DocuSign for where these guys are going. But more and more surfacing about potential moves, I think, with some of these top recruits. So it's going to be fun, Bud. I'm excited.
All right, so let's just kind of run down our notes as we work towards show prep for our live show there on CBS HQ and our various YouTube channels on National Signing Day. That's next Wednesday. We'll be live 10 to 2, I think it is. So very excited about that. You'll see some graphics coming out. And a lot of our voices also featured on the Paramount Plus documentary 5 Star, which comes out the day before that. So a lot of recruiting kind of content coming out of the CBS family of networks. But one of our big storylines that we'll be tracking here, Ivins, is who's going to finish number one and what does it mean? So, like, who do we think's got the inside track? Who's maybe coming down the rail? Like, how do they get there if they do? Lay it on me.
Well, Bud, I feel like we could turn this into a lock segment here if we wanted to kind of handicap who has a chance to finish number one. It's looking like USC, and we've been gushing, I think, for this entire cycle about the Trojans and new GM Chad Bowden. They are in the driver's seat coming down the stretch, right? They're in the fourth quarter. They are trying to bleed out some game clock here. USC, I mean, we're talking about a class that's over 35 guys. So it could be the first time they finish number one in the 24/7 sports era. I think the other, big picture thought with USC potentially taking home the recruiting crown is it's a Big Ten school, right? It's not an SEC program. And I think that kind of plays into the ever-changing landscape, the distribution of all of the talent in the sport. With that being said, as we've inched closer and closer, there is a chance some other people could surpass them. And the one, or I think the two recruitments to keep your eyes on are the Matter Day wide receivers. And we've discussed them here on the Cover 3 Recruiting Hour. I'm talking about Chris Henry Jr., 5-star wide receiver, and then Caden Dixon-Wyatt, right behind him, top 64 player. I think he's Carnell Tate. Chris Henry, they're two completely different guys. They've been committed to Zone 6 and Brian Hartline in Ohio State for the longest time. But Oregon is a team that has been mentioned. USC as well, but this entire kind of recruiting cycle, it's been Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks really with both of these individuals. And if Oregon, which pound for pound has one of the strongest recruiting classes out there, right? They don't have 35 guys. They're sitting around 20. They got a lot of blue chip. Last year, Oregon signed, every player they signed was a 4- or 5-star recruit. That's not going to be the case here in 2026, but it's much of the same for Dan Lanning. If Oregon can get those two guys, they could jump USC if they can flip them and pry them away from Ohio State. So that's one team that has a chance. The other team is Texas A&M and Mike Elko and general manager Derek Miller, obviously very involved in the college football playoff conversation. Really strong recruiting class for them. About 5 guys that are in play. They would need to go 5 for 5. So again, if we were handicapping this, major
That's
long
a serious
shot.
parlay.
Yeah, serious parlay. Maybe a money line sprinkle out there. I don't think it's going to happen because, it would start with Lamar Brown, the 5-star, 280-pound athlete who's committed to LSU. They would need him, and then they would need to get some other things to happen. Wide receiver Booby Feaster, who's committed to USC. Wide receiver Jace Matthews, who's committed to Auburn. So, mathematically, they can do it. I think Oregon's got maybe the best chance to unseat USC. And I'll close here on the race for number one. You can go to 247sports.com. You can get into the class calculator. You can add your recruits and do the math yourself. Come up with some crazy scenarios, right? It's like a trade, trade tool of sorts.
I mean, that thing is fun to play with, dude. It's almost like the NBA trade deadline calculator. Like you can see who goes where, what does it affect? And you're like, wait, how does adding this guy just make this much sense? And it's obviously like each successive recruit matters a various amount, based on the rating and the number of kids in the class, obviously. But yeah, that is a fun tool to play with. I mean, like I think the fact that it's likely USC or Oregon is a good thing for the Big Ten, right? I don't think people really care if it's like, hey, the SEC has 9 and the Big Ten has 6. But if it's like the SEC has 9 and the Big Ten has 3, like that's enough of disparity where people start really making like conference strength arguments, So making sure the Big Ten has like a strong 4, 5, 6, and we talked about Washington's class last week.
Yeah,
is pretty important.
But I've kind of marinated on that, right? Like, okay, we obviously know Michigan's going to recruit well. We obviously know Ohio State's going to recruit well, but what do the rest of the Big Ten and Washington? I continue to gush about them and Jed Fish and Matt Doherty there, what they've been able to do. They could have a heck of a finish here. They are in it for a lot of flip targets. Iowa, we've mentioned them. Iowa always recruits well on the defensive side of the ball, kind of dug into their class. And you're like, yep, this is a future NFL guy. Yep, this is a future NFL guy. But, Bud, we're seeing an influx of talent. I think it's on offense. And obviously, Traden Bessinger, the quarterback, they flipped from Boise State, sitting inside the top 247. But they got some skill perimeter players at wide receiver, a kid I know you like here in Florida, Xavier Stinson. You can kind of go up and down the list. And then the other one, SIG in Indiana. I think they got another Mikael Karma committed and Cavante Huggin, another kid out of Florida. They, I think, have used what they did last season, what they're doing this season to, get involved with a higher caliber prospect. And I think that's notable because Indiana's roster has been built on the under the radar guys, right? The guys where SIG and his staff have been able to find some market value. So what does this look like if they can get, that player that has a higher ceiling? So Indiana, Iowa, Washington, some other teams in the Big Ten where monitor the situation.
Monitoring for sure. All right, let's go ahead and hit this here. About a month ago, we engaged in what Georgia fans told us was clickbait nonsense. Oh, you guys trying to make cover 3 a thing, all this other stuff. Talking about how Vanderbilt was a legitimate threat to flip Jared Curtis. We were told that was just a courtesy visit, right? And it was cool to get mentioned on game day. Well, seems like there may be something to that, and maybe this ain't no hobby for you, huh? To quote Kisner.
Yeah, Tom Loy, National Recruiting Insider for 247 Sports on Saturday, put out a insider piece basically saying he's calling his shot. He thinks Jared Curtis, the 5-star quarterback, number 3 player in the class, is going to sign with Vanderbilt. And I've talked with Tom a bunch since then. I think he is pretty well sourced on this. I don't think it's just one single entity. I think this was a collection of him gathering information from a ton of different sides to this. Tom still feels, 6-7 days out, that Vanderbilt is likely going to be the landing spot for Jared Curtis. And Bud, let's revisit that conversation we had a month ago when we were recklessly speculating about a difference maker ending up in Nashville. Jared Curtis, from what we've heard, wants to play early. I think the path to playing time in Athens doesn't look as easy as it once did, right? With Gunnar Stockton, and he's become an assassin for the Bulldogs, who down the stretch here, I think you guys said it on Cover 3 earlier in the week, like that's a team you don't want to face. And I think Gunnar Stockton is a big reason why.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, you look at Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia. I mean, maybe, Bud, you got a law degree. You tell me maybe he finds another season of eligibility, but someone else is going to have to take over there under center. And Barton Simmons, Clark Lee, they've done an excellent job of building a contender there. But I do think that that quarterback room, it's a big question mark. And I go back to a conversation I had with Barton, in August at the Player Personnel Symposium, where me and him were discussing, how player rankings impact the NIL contracts and dictate the money flow. Barton was telling me, he's like, I don't really know how much a high-profile quarterback goes because we've never been in that market. So if you think about Vanderbilt, which has broke through, had College Game Day, they want to stay in the national spotlight. They need kind of a poster child. And why not Jared Curtis, a local kid, a kid that we think is probably the most ready to play quarterback out of all these guys in 2026. And, I've said it, I think, multiple places. I mean, if Jared Curtis ends up at Vanderbilt, go ahead and put him on the Mount Rushmore of Commodore quarterbacks, right? It's going to be Pavia.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be Jay Cutler. Then it's going to be Jared Curtis. And Jay Cutler was 4-year starter there at Vanderbilt, and it was certainly rocky early on. And I think there would certainly be some lumps like we see with all these, high profile quarterbacks and any quarterback. But Jared Curtis, I think he fits Tim Beck. I think it makes a ton of sense for both parties. So I think this is something we seriously need to consider being a reality here in the lead up to next Wednesday.
I agree, man. All right. So do you think we could see more quarterback movement? I mean, like, there are some high profile teams out there who have not done a great job recruiting QB in recent cycles, who still don't have a QB for this cycle. Like, are they really going to wait for 27, or do you think they try to make a move, this year?
Yeah, but I think, again, working the phones, and that I'm certainly not the scoop guy, but I do think we're going to see some quarterback movement here as soon as some of these high-profile jobs get filled. And what's unique about this 2026 quarterback class? But it's like so many of these guys are hurt, like ACLs. Faison Brandon, obviously, who's headed to Tennessee, he has returned to action. But I think if you looked at the 20 quarterbacks that were at the Elite 11 finals back in July, I think 10 of them are injured. I've never seen anything like it. And, injuries happen, but just this volume has made it, I don't know, it feels unique. And I think for a lot of schools that in the past would try to make a run at a kid, every injury is different, but I think it gives a little bit of hesitation. Okay, this guy's not playing a senior season, or okay, this guy, he might need to get medically cleaned up there. Now, with that being said, I think schools are slowly realizing that, hey, like, we should take a high school kid every single year, given all the movement, but sometimes it's a cheaper option than another guy out in the transfer portal. And I think it gets difficult to bring in multiple transfer portal arms. So I do think there's going to be some quarterbacks, that potentially, again, as we get closer and closer, maybe there's some more, message board posts and in the days before the early signing period where, hey, this kid's considering this, or hey, this kid's considering that. I also think there's some teams out there that are potentially looking to upgrade the guy that's been their guy throughout this entire cycle. And I do think we're going to see something. The other thing, like, I keep throwing this fact at people. Hey, the past 3 years, we have seen a 5-star quarterback at the last minute choose a different school, right? It was Dante Moore, longtime Oregon commit, ends up signing with UCLA. Now, obviously, he's back with the Ducks, but he's one. Dylan Raiola, it was Georgia. Now he's at Nebraska, and he quickly became, the day one starter. He was the face of that program. And then last year, it was Bryce Underwood, LSU, and now he's at Michigan starting as a true freshman. The one to me that I have my eye on, and I think whoever takes over there at LSU is going to have to go into the transfer portal. But man, like, what is the short term? What is the long term here playing at quarterback? Like, there's a lot of questions because they didn't take one last year and they don't have one committed this year.
I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, what happens with this. I agree with the idea of taking one. Like, a lot of these schools are getting these kids on multi-year contracts now. So, like, the more guys you have in that format, like, you get the 2 years to evaluate them. And it's just like, that's a position oftentimes you just really don't know what you have until you get on campus, man. Like, it's not that, like, evaluating quarterbacks is a total, like, crapshoot. I think it's a little more precise than that, but it's it's hard because there's a lot of things that the college game requires. You just don't get the opportunity to see, like, to the good or to the bad in high school, right? Like, even the guys we think are the best QB evaluators, they miss all the time, so.
But I think the other element, which I don't think anyone has really been able to figure out, is, I mean, you're taking a guy 17, 18 years old, and you're putting him on a college campus. Now they have all this, extra money in a
Right.
lot of cases. Like, what does that look like? Because I go back to when I was 17 or 18, hey, you got to go to class. Hey, you got to show up for that 5 a.m. workout. I it makes sense if you have the roster numbers. And let's not forget, you can carry 105 now, 105 players to volume shoot at that quarterback position. So
I agree, man. All right. Flip watch. We got a bunch here on Flip Watch, man. So LSU's big guys: Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson, Martinez. You're talking like 3 premium blue chip guys along the line of scrimmage. Is there anybody here that LSU should actually feel good about? And does it matter the timeline of them hiring a head coach?
I mean, I think we're gonna discuss all 3 of these players, and like, I think there's a good chance all 3 could end up at LSU. And I think that's what makes LSU, that job, so attractive to a Lane Kiffin or whoever they end up with. The best in the boot are going to stay in the boot. And, since Brian Kelly was dismissed and let go, LSU's only suffered one decommitment. That was DeAnthony Lafayette, edge rusher out of Orlando. He ends up flipping to Miami. Everyone else has remained committed. And to me, it feels like LSU, Bud, and I don't know if you would agree. It's one of those schools where, like, the in-state kids just go to LSU because they know they're going to hire a good coach. They know that they're going to have a chance to go to the NFL. They know that they're going to play in all these big games. I mean, the era that Lamar Brown and Richard Anderson grew up in, like, that was the Joe Burrow years. Like, that is like burned into them at 12 years old. So, I think there's a good chance these 3 do stick with LSU. But others are going to continue to chip away. We've discussed Lamar Brown, right? He could be DL1, IOL1, kid that goes to school right there. Texas A&M is certainly the one to monitor here. And Mike Elko and his staff, they sunk their teeth in pretty early. Now, will that relationship pay off? We'll see. Richard Anderson, newly minted 5-star defensive lineman. He's at Edna Carr in New Orleans. He took an official visit to Texas over the weekend. As much as we gush about Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson is one of my favorite players in this entire class. I mean, he's the definition of a war daddy. Remember Ed Oregon would be like,
yeah,
war daddy, like that is Richard Anderson. If we would put him in the 24/7 Sports CBS Sports dictionary of war daddy, let's just put a photo of Richard Anderson. Like, he is 6'3", he is 350 pounds, but he is wide and he is explosive. Like, I think this is a guy that's going to have a chance to come in and make an impact right away because he can give you valuable minutes from the jump. And it has been that case at Edna Carr. It's one of those kids where you're trying to study someone else on his team or they're facing, and your eyes just go to Richard Anderson because this guy shouldn't be doing that. Texas, they are a program that has invested a ton at the point of attack, and more specifically so in the middle on the defensive line. I mean, think about all the transfers they brought in at D-tackle nose last year. So that's the one to keep an eye on. And then this Bryson Martinez kid, he's fun, bud. He is an offensive tackle projection. He is playing quarterback here as a senior. Another in-state kid, 280-pound offensive tackle. I believe he's been playing QB out of necessity. He's a freak athlete, probably going to be, a longer burn in terms of, I don't think you need to view him as a tackle that's going to be thrown into the fire year one. But he is a guy that has legitimate NFL upside. And he too took an official visit to Texas. And, what has been the issue for Texas this season? You can point to, I think, a lot of different things. I would start with the offensive line. And I think offensive line recruiting over the past few years has left a lot to be desired.
Dude, I mean, that would be wild to watch this kid make the transition. I mean, obviously he's going to try, but like to go from playing quarterback. But we have seen this before, right?
He has played offensive tackle. I believe there's an injury there at his high school, and they're like, all right, hey, yeah, let's let this guy do it.
Who was the right tackle for the Eagles? Played for Oklahoma. He was a high school quarterback in Texas and a kind of a decent one. Went to JUCO as a tight end, got to OU as a tight end. They moved him to offensive tackle, and I was like, a Hall of Famer for the Eagles. Like, it does happen once in a while. Now I can't forget the guy's name. Whoever plays, is it Johnson? Maybe
you're putting me on the spot here.
This is going to require Google. Eagles tackle Johnson. Lane Johnson. Yep.
Lane Johnson.
There you go.
I didn't know he was a quarterback.
Yeah, he was quarterback and went to JUCO as a tight end.
Can I give you another fun fact I learned here over the past week?
Yeah.
My comp for Jared Curtis is Jay Cutler. And
look at that.
I think a lot of people will be like, well, Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler ran the football a lot. When he was a senior in high school, state title game, two-way player, started at safety, 17 tackles in the state title game while starting at quarterback, Jay Cutler.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, that was a eye-opener for me.
Another QB to tackle transition was Titus Howard, the guy who plays on the Houston Texans, came out of Alabama State. So
there's a few more. I mean, if you really dig into the offensive tackles, selected day 3 of the NFL draft, the backgrounds on these guys are very, very unique.
Yeah, exactly right. Like many of them seem to be like they were always a really good athlete. They just kept growing.
Yeah,
in some shape or form. All right, here's an interesting one for you. The modern day receiver duo. We're looking at Chris Henry Jr. and then Dixon Wyatt as well. We think these guys are potential to stick. And who do you like better?
Yeah, but I mean, kind of touched on them a little bit earlier when we were discussing the race for number 1. I mean, long time Ohio State commits and Oregon was very involved very early on. I would guess like these guys end up at Ohio State, but what happens if Brian Hartline, starts getting linked somewhere else?
He might get a job.
That's a name that I'm certainly not as engulfed in it as you, but it hasn't really been out there. To me, like the big picture storyline here is Ohio State has really kind of just drafted at the wide receiver position. And I think Brian Hartline is the best at fine tuning these wideouts, right? Yeah, he gets the guys that have the biggest upside, have the highest floor, but he squeezes the most out of them, right? I mean, we can point to example after example. I mean, just turn on Red Zone on Sunday. There's going to be a former Buckeye, crossing into the end zone. So, is it much of the same for Ohio State, or, is there a little chink in the armor here, just with the distribution of funding and a changing landscape with Dan Lanning there at Oregon? I think that's what you got to keep your eyes on. And, one other thing I was thinking about with the Chris Henry, with the Caden Dixon White. Do you remember when Jeremiah Smith ended up signing with Ohio State? Like Ryan Day's reaction during the press conference, like that should have been our sign about what was to come. And obviously, I mean, we had Jeremiah number 1, but do we see something similar from Ryan Day if there is some wonky stuff and Ohio State's waiting around for the Mater Day duo to, I don't know, officially get the paperwork in?
I think there was also a bit of like, that was the first year where like big NIL was involved in high school, if I recall. And so I think part of that was like, all right, we don't really know how this process is going to work out. Was our approach enough? Was it the right approach? Like, obviously, like in the old school times, we'd have this one easy, right? Given Hartline and their track record, like, would that plus our approach to the new school be enough? And kind of because obviously they knew how good the player was, but also like a sigh of relief, like, okay, all right, like our approach is not totally off on what we're doing here. So, all right, other top 247 talent we should probably discuss here who maybe have a chance to flip. I know like some guys who are getting some continued interest. UCLA commit Carter Goodwin, or sorry, not Goodwin, Gooden. Wisconsin commit Jaden Petit. Florida commit CJ Brana. Penn State commit Matt Sieg. Penn State commit Terry Wiggins. And, of course, Baylor commit Jordan Clay. Any of those guys we think are on serious flip watch?
Yeah, I think all of them.
Okay.
Yeah, Carter Gooden. I love this kid, bud. He's originally from Canada. He's a 4-sport athlete. He's doing, the prep school thing up there in the United States. This is a kid where, we were super high on him from the jump. And I think a lot of colleges did the thing where, is he an edge? Is he an interior guy? It's like, guys, it doesn't really matter. Like, he's going to give you some versatility. He can get after the quarterback. He's a big, athletic, big body. And it's just been fun to see the adjustment. He's a longtime UCLA commit. There's another coaching search where, hey, who's going to be the guy there? But he just took an official visit to Vanderbilt. He's going to get to Tennessee this weekend for an official visit. He's a guy that is slated to play in the Navy All-American Bowl. He reminds me of Akeem Messidor at Miami. We always talk about Ruben Bain, but his counterpart on the other side, Akeem Messidor, same thing. Is he an inside guy? Is he an outside guy? Guys, he rushes, he crushes, he closes, he gets to the quarterback. So I think Carter Gooden's one. There's been a few other schools involved there, but hey, how about a Vandy, Tennessee recruiting battle come down the stretch? So yeah, I one to certainly keep an eye on, especially if you reside in the Volunteer State. Jaden Petit, wide receiver out of your neck of the woods there, former neck of the woods, bud. He's on the west coast of Florida. I think this kid has had as good of a senior season as anyone in America, like over 24 touchdown catches through 11 games, might surpass 30 depending on what happens in the state playoffs. He is a longtime Wisconsin commit. And when I studied him, I'm like, how is Luke Fickell getting this wide receiver that can be a game wrecker on the outside? He's big. He's coordinated. He's got some build speed, acrobatic catches. Washington has been involved here. Oklahoma's been involved here. Jim Nagy, Brent Venables, they are doing some things here. So you want to talk about an SEC team that is set to make some noise. They just flipped top 247 running back Jonathan Hatton from Texas A&M. That happened on Monday. Oklahoma, Jim Nagy, when he came in, it took him some time to find his bearings, but I think he's really hitting his stride here. And it's not just him. That entire department he has built out, the alignment from the top to the bottom, they are certainly parlaying what they have done on the field. So Oklahoma is a team to watch. CJ Brona, Florida commit, but I've had to jump on HQ like multiple times and talk about the Gators class and, hey, what's going on here? What's going on there? He's the one guy where I think Florida could lose him. And he is a height, weight, speed corner, back-to-back 100-meter dash champ in the Sunshine State. Did it in one of the lower classifications, but hey, you put him in 49 other states, he's going to probably win a state title as well. Maybe not in Texas. Ohio State is involved there. He's a former Nebraska commit. Can the Buckeyes continue to add to a really, really good recruiting class? One to keep an eye on. And then I think whoever takes over at Florida, CJ Brona is one of your first calls. So those three there, and then Matt Sieg, safety, longtime Penn State commit. He's an OKG for the 24/7 sports scouting department. Our kind of guy. He is playing there in Pittsburgh. He has broken multiple records set by Tyler Boyd. He's a starting quarterback. He does it as a safety on defense. He was committed to James Franklin. Obviously, James Franklin's now at Virginia Tech. Indiana's been involved. Notre Dame's been involved. West Virginia's been involved. Everyone is trying to get this kid because, he is a hard-nosed football player, instinctive individual. Reminds me of Dan Jackson, who was at Georgia, former walk-on. He was a high school quarterback. He's now playing in the league on Sundays. I just think these guys are so valuable with these cover two shells and their ability to read and diagnose. It sounds like Matt Sieg likely going to announce on signing day. And hey, maybe Penn State has a coach in place by then. I mean, certainly he has not backed off that commitment to the Nittany Lions. I would consider it soft, but I think he's one on Wednesday, December 3rd, where, when we start talking about winners and losers, whoever lands Matt Sieg, that's going to help their case for the winner category when it comes to what happens on day one of the signing period.
100%, man. I'm interested to see like where he ends up going on the Oklahoma piece. Like, when they got there, there was a lot of like, not necessarily just from Jim, but just like, folks around there like, hey, these 3 stars are amazing. And, kind of like the messaging was sort of like at least how I read it, like the implied was like, hey, we're fine. Like we can out scout everybody and like get all these 3 stars. And I was like, that just seems so unlikely because yes, I know y'all came from the NFL, but like, it's not like the scouts for these college departments currently suck, right? Like they've been watching this a long time. They understand some of the translations and, some of the things there that matter that maybe you wouldn't pick up. Like I think Carolina's department didn't at first, right? Like, hey, height, weight, speed. We've unlocked the secret. And like, oh, yeah, height, weight, speed. That's a good idea. And like, wish everybody else wouldn't have thought of that. But like, I am curious. I mean, what are they? 12 4-stars, 10 3-stars on the composite, or something, something like that. A little bit less on 24/7. Like, do you think they're trying to go like in fantasy football? You'd call it stars and scrubs, right? Where you pay up for like a couple studs, and then you kind of just like pepper the board with cheap options and hope your studs stay healthy. And then I guess the implication here is like maybe just attack the transfer portal and see like which of your underrated kids hit. Like, what do you think about their strategy here? Because they're not really like they have one top 100. Like, I guess Hatton's now number 100. So they have 2 top 100 kids, 4 kids in the top 247. It's not like SEC standard, just not like a real impressive looking class.
And I think 2027 is going to be the cycle for them. I don't have that class pulled up, but it's certainly in the top 10. They've done some really good work there early. Bud, I think having limited interactions with Jim Nagy. I mean, certainly it's
always really good dude to me. Like when we would chop it up. Yeah,
he's one of the brightest minds I think in the sport. I from my perch and how I see this, they're certainly going to go after their first rounders at some point. And those would be the 5 stars. Those would be the guys at the top of the board. But where they really seem to be trying to hit and find the value is in day 3 and then in that UDFA range. So, all right, let's call day 3 anyone in the top 247 after 100. And then we'll call the UDFAs, any of those 3-star prospects. I mean, there isn't a guy that they have taken with 3 stars next to their name where I'm like, I don't really see this. And they're in the hunt for this kid, Dane Bathurst out of Indiana, off ball linebacker, could play some on ball. Dad was a former Navy SEAL. Like, he's been like a blue star personal darling for us. And I think, Oklahoma fans would be like, well, hey, why isn't he a 4-star prospect? Can't make everyone 4 stars. But to me, like, this guy makes sense. This guy's got developmental upside. So, is it like the money ball approach? Yeah, that would be like a lazy term for it. But I think it's more of, okay, I'm coming from the NFL. I got an NFL background. What is working in the NFL? Who are the teams that are playing for the Super Bowl, right? It's the teams that are really hitting in that day 3 UDF range. And yes, they go out and they get the free agents in the transfer portal. Yes, they hit it out of the park with their first rounders and their second rounders, but really the spine, the backbone of that roster is where they're getting the value. And I think that's what they're getting to that sweet spot here. And, again, I think like Oklahoma winning is really helping, because as much as recruiting has changed and its compensation and all that, like, you still got to give kids a reason to go there. You still got to build the relationships, and you still got to get them on campus. Like, you can't just do that with a written or verbal offer.
No doubt. Yeah, I like the idea that, like, if they execute it, hey, we take a lot of shots from guys that it'll probably be an extremely high bust rate, but also like maybe we'll get some good starters out of it, and those starters are cost controlled in some ways, maybe for 2 years, and we'll see kind of what pops out of there. All right, let me. Anybody else on this top 247 list we read off? If not, we can talk some of these uncommitted guys that people want to be watching down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, there's only again, like you start building out these lists of like best available, who's in play, and it's just changing because Bud, all it's what if Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss? Okay,
right.
If he stays and I said this on HQ this morning, it's like Lane is going to want to stretch this thing all he can. Right now, Ole Miss's recruiting class is 20th. Okay, but over the last 4 years, so 4 consecutive years, Ole Miss has signed a top 5 transfer portal class. So, yes, Lane is an excellent play caller, right? Like Lane has certainly built some fun and competitive rosters there at Ole Miss, but he has done it through the transfer portal. To him, he's just got to be where he wants to be by the time that window opens up in January. They have supplemented a little bit here and there with the high school recruiting. I think they've gotten better, notably on the defensive side of the ball. You look at their front seven. A lot of those guys were from the high school ranks, the Will Eccles, the Cam Franklin, obviously Centurine Perkins, but they've been so transfer portal heavy. So I bring up Lane and all that because, okay, what if LSU and Florida have to pivot elsewhere? Florida, I think Drink at Missouri's been mentioned, Fish at Washington's been mentioned. I know Lincoln Riley has shut everything down, but I was in Gainesville over the weekend, Bud, and embedded myself in Gator Nation. That was the name that came up after Lane was Lincoln Riley. And then LSU, I mean, what direction do they go? I think it's a similar group of candidates. And again, why I'm bringing that up is, okay, if one of these guys leaves that job, Washington has a number 15 class. You don't think these guys are going to look around? USC has the number 1 class. You don't think that these guys are going to look around? It's just kind of hard to figure out really who is available because a lot of it is up in the air. It's on shifting sands here.
And some of these guys are already on some interesting NIL contracts that basically don't allow them to visit elsewhere. If they visit elsewhere, they have to pay some of this money back. I'm not really sure how legal or not legal some of this stuff actually is, but of course if it doesn't get reported, it's not a big deal anyway. So
but would you subscribe to the theory that we got a lot of agents out there, how would you allow your client to sign a contract where there's not some out if there's a coaching change? That just seems,
well, I mean, it depends on how much money is being offered, right? It's terms and price. So if they're willing to just knock you out of the park on price, then, and the kid says he really wants to go there, you can advise them, hey, stuff happens in college football. If the school's dangling 1.8 over 2 years for you, right, and you're a mid-level 4-star, I mean, are you going to turn that down, especially if they're giving you some of that up front? The agent can only really present the offer, can advise on the offer, but he can't jump in front of the offer and say you're not allowed to sign this. Really, I'm sure some do actually, but ultimately that kind of is what it is. But in some cases, the kids they'll still flip, and the school who wants him will just pay the buyout on it, right? But I don't that. I do wonder how many of these guys truly flip, and if we see a lot of them don't flip from one school, that might be an indication that the rumors that hey, that school's got some kind of unofficial side NIL deals that really have their teeth in them. That might be a good indication that those deals are real.
One other thing, and I think if you asked me 6 months ago, I'd have been okay, February's traditional signing day. I mean, it has slowly lost momentum. I think last year, we did the signing day show, the traditional one in February, and all we did was talk about the transfer portal and preview the upcoming season because there was no one available. I think there's a chance we're going to see some guys maybe hold out, right? Think about it, Bud. If you are at a premium position, if you're an offensive tackle, if you're
I agree with you here.
A quarterback, you're a defensive lineman. If you decide not to sign early and you're I'm going to wait till February, your value is going to be the highest it has ever been. I had a college staffer tell me this. There's going to be schools that are sitting there. hey, we need depth at defensive tackle. Do you want to take this guy from the group of 5 program where there ain't no ceiling, or should we go get this high school guy? And if we get to it in a pinch, like, he could provide some depth. It will be interesting to see if guys do kind of hold out and what that group looks like. Like, what is that best available list look like after, as we get after Christmas? Because if I was advising, I'd be like, hey man, like, actually, you do control this right now. And that has never been the case.
I agree, man. It's going to be really interesting to see. I would, like, depending on positions, especially if you're not a kid who is enrolling early, like, it's not, if you're really that good, the money's still going to be there. It's not going to dry up, so.
Hey, there might be more money coming off the books.
Right.
January 1st.
Absolutely. The one thing that could shake this up is we don't know what's going to happen with the 5-for-5 injunction, which is going to be heard in mid-December. So if that gets granted, you're going to have a pretty good number of guys who were in the class of 2022 who would otherwise be out of eligibility, who all of a sudden get to play as like a 23-year-old fifth-year senior. And not like, there's probably like 80 to 100 guys who actually matter with that designation, who like you would, like, as a like upper half Power 5 team, you would be interested in acquiring, keeping. Like, that's going to shake up the transfer market a lot if that happens, because none of those guys are on multi-year deals, because like schools were not writing the deal to cover like a year that it wasn't supposed to exist. Yeah. So all those dudes are like instantly free agents. So that would be the only thing that might put a little bit of a kink in that plan, right? Is if all of a sudden you get a bunch of 23-year-olds who are eligible.
Hey, you could go to JUCO. JUCO recruiting's back as well, baby.
It is, man. It is.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And for those not familiar, JUCO recruiting, just with the transfer portal window, just the one window now, talking with some different personnel people, and the commit lists reflect this. Schools are ensuring that they got some depth, right? And they're looking for guys in junior college, because let's not forget, there's been an influx of talent headed to JUCO, just given how you can cut players, and so much focus has been on adding transfers over high schoolers. Well, now the JUCOs are stocked with talent, and you can get those guys with multi-years, and you're not overpaying for depth in the transfer portal, because, hey, you got this junior college player, and guess what? He's here week 1, class 1 of our spring semester.
Exactly right. Awesome, man. Well, hey, this has been fantastic. I'm about 48 minutes now. So Wednesday, 10 a.m. signing day show, 4 hours worth of coverage. We will completely nerd out and stuff. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to see everybody in Lauderdale. Look at that. Got the graphic going too.
Yeah, I think we're going to have some GMs on, Bud. I think we're going to have some announcements. It's going to be me, you, Tom Loy, recapping what should be a fun day. Here's the reality, Bud. We cannot foresee over the next, again, depending on when everyone's listening to this, 4, 5, 6 days, whatever it is. But there's going to be some things that I think the biggest thing is teams are going to get better, right? Like, teams are going to get better. They are going to put themselves in position to be in that college football playoff conversation. At the same time, I think there's going to be some schools and programs who are wondering if, what direction this whole thing's headed.
Do completely agree. Excited to do it with you on Wednesday. And this has been the Cover 3 Recruiting Hour.